Good evening, students. This question is about the uterus. Okay, so the question is, write about the uterus under following heads: introduction of the uterus, parts of the uterus, sagittal and coronal section. Okay, we will try to see the structure of uterus in sagittal and coronal section, then peritoneal relations, how the peritoneum is reflected onto the uterus, then visceral relation, and then the orientation of the uterus, okay, and its axis, then arterial supply, lymphatic drainage, and lastly we will learn about the applied anatomy. Okay, let's come to the answer. In the introduction, we may write that uterus is a female genital organ. Okay, it is a female internal organ, internal genital organ, and its function is to bear the child for the 9th lunar month or 10th lunar month. Okay, this childbearing structure, this is where ultimately the fetus is grown, okay, and it is developing within the uterine cavity, okay, uterine cavity for 40 weeks, for 40 weeks. Now this is a muscular organ, a thick muscle coat is there, so it is a muscular organ. And if you see the shape of the uterus, it is pyriform in shape. See this. This is the uterus as seen from the surface. These are the two uterine tubes which comes out from the uterus, and the whole shape of the uterus is a pyriform shape, which is broad above. Broad above means it is here about 5 centimeter broad, but if you will go towards the lower end, it will become quite narrow. So it is a pyriform in shape. It is having the broad above and it is narrow below. Now this organ, the female genital organ, is located in the pelvis, lesser pelvis or pelvic cavity, between the urinary bladder and in front of the rectum. So the rectum lies behind and the urinary bladder, it lies in front of the uterus. Now this is the uterus, there's pear-shaped structure. Below it is continuous with that of the vagina. So in front of the uterus lies the urinary bladder, and behind, okay, it is in relation to the rectum. Okay, so how this is located in the lesser pelvis, okay, lesser. If you see the measurement of the rectum, see this measurement of these measurements here, its length is 7.5 centimeter, that is equivalent to the 3 inches. Then the width is at the 5 centimeter, and then the thickness, anteroposterior thickness, is about an inch or 2.5 centimeter. Now these are the dimension of a uterus which is not bearing the child. Okay, that means there is no embryo or the fetus within the cavity of the uterus. This is a normal uterus. Okay, normal uterus. So these are the dimensions, but then this uterus enlarges enormously, okay, during the pregnancy. It will become very large. Okay, so this small uterus which has these dimensions, okay, has the capacity to enlarge. Okay, capacity to enlarge. Okay, let us come to the parts of the uterus. We will just see the broad parts of the uterus right now, and then we will go to the detailed parts, okay, after learning its cavity, okay, after learning the cavity which is present within the uterus. Now if you see the parts of the uterus on external surface, we are examining if the uterus from external surface, it shows a constriction here. See this pear-shaped structure is showing a constriction here, and this constriction is at its junction where it is upper 2/3 and the lower 1/3. So at the junction of upper 2/3 and the lower 1/3, there is a constriction is seen here, and this constriction is called as isthmus. Okay, this constriction is called as the isthmus. Now, the part above this isthmus is the body. So, this is the body part of the uterus, okay? And below the isthmus, this part, narrow part, is called as cervix. So, uterus is broadly divided into two parts, the upper body and lower cervix, okay? Lower cervix. Now, vagina is attached to the cervix, okay? Thus, cervix has two parts. So, this is the side for attachment. That means it is attached almost, vagina is a tubular structure which is attached almost in the middle of the cervix, so that the part of the cervix, okay, which is lower part, it becomes its structure within the vagina. So that is that part of the cervix which lies within the vagina. Say for example, this is vagina as we are seeing from the surface. That part which is within the vagina is called as portio vaginalis, or the part of the cervix which lies within the vagina, okay? And then a part of the cervix is above the attachment of the vagina, okay? Above. This is supravaginal part. So there is a supravaginal part, and then there is a vaginal part of the cervix. So the cervix is now divided into two parts, a supravaginal and a vaginal part, okay? So these are the parts of the uterus, very broadly speaking. First I will tell you about the cavity which is present within the uterus, okay? And then we will come back to the detail of these parts. So to see the cavity of the uterus, we will take two sections. One section is the sagittal section, that is passing from the middle. Sagittal section along close to the median plane, okay? This sagittal section we will take. And second section which we will take is the coronal section, which will divide the uterus in anterior half and posterior half. So this will be a coronal section, and with the help of these two sections we can understand the size and shape of the cavity, uterine cavity as it is called, which is present within the body and cervix of the uterus. A sagittal section, let us see the first. A sagittal section through the uterus will show a slit-like narrow lumen. That means anterior and posterior wall of this uterus, they will be very close to each other, okay? They will be almost touching to each other. So there is a very narrow cavity is present in the sagittal section, okay, with slit-like. But in coronal section you will see a broad cavity which is triangular in shape, okay? Between the anterior and posterior wall, a triangular cavity is seen. Now let us see those two sections and see the shape of the cavity, okay? Here you can see. Now this is a coronal section. See this? These are the uterine tube, and this cavity, okay, here, this is the cavity, and this is a triangular cavity which is broad above, just like the body of the uterus, and narrow below, okay? That is a sagittal section of the uterus along with the vagina and that of the cervix, okay? Lower part of the cervix which is within the vaginal cavity. And this section is a sagittal section. This was a coronal section. This is a sagittal section where you are seeing this uterus here. This is the anterior wall of the uterus. This is posterior wall, and in between this you can see that this cavity of the uterus is very narrow, slit-like. Same is true for the cervix, okay, cavity of the cervix, right? So this is the shape of the cavity uterine. It means the uterine cavity which is present is a triangular cavity in the coronal section, which is very narrow, where the anterior wall of the uterus and posterior, they are very close to each other. So these are, this must have given you an idea about the cavity which is quite narrow, present within the uterus. Now, if you see this wall of the uterus in this coronal section or in this sagittal section, if you are seeing this wall of this, you will see that there are three layers, okay, which are better seen here in coronal section. It consists of the three layers. And which are these three layers? Outermost is a peritoneal covering, and this peritoneal covering is called as perimetrium. Can you see here? This is that perimetrium. That is nothing but the peritoneum lining to the surface of the uterus, and this perimetrium is quite thin. See this? So this is the outermost layer is perimetrium, which is nothing but the peritoneal covering. Then comes the myometrium. This is the myo, which is made up of the smooth muscle everywhere, okay, in anterior wall, posterior wall, okay, everywhere this myometrium, which is quite thick, is smooth muscle, okay, it is made up of the smooth muscle. The same myometrium from the body is also continuous down below in the cervix also, cervical part below the isthmus, okay, lower 1/3 part, okay. This is the myometrium is also continuous below in the cervix, okay. Now, as I said that it is the smooth muscle, since it is a viscera, this smooth muscle is innervated by sympathetic and the parasympathetic nerve. Then there is a third layer here which lines the uterine cavity, and this third layer, which I have shown you here in the orange color here, is nothing but the endometrium, okay, and this is a kind of the mucosal lining. It is lined by the epithelium, deep to which is the lamina propria, in which there are the endometrial gland, blood vessels, lymphatics, stroma or connective tissues are there. But see that this endometrium is not continuous with the cervix, okay, which is called as the cervical cavity of cervix is called as cervical canal, and it is not continuous. It stops at the isthmus. Thus, the endometrium lines the uterine cavity only in the body part, okay, only in the body part. So these are the three layers of the uterine cavity, uterus, okay, perimetrium, myometrium and endometrium, and it is true for the body and the fundus part. What is fundus? Okay, I forgot to mention you. Now, the part of the uterus which lies above the opening of these two fallopian tube or uterine tube at the base or at the broader part of the uterus, okay. These are the two tubes which comes and open into the uterine tubes. They are called as the fallopian tubes also. Their function is to bring the ovum after ovulation, okay, and bring it to the uterine cavity, okay. So these are the uterine tube, and in between these two uterine tube, whatsoever part of the uterus lies above this level, it is called as the fundus, okay, and it is convex upward and lined by perimetrium, myometrium, and also lined by the endometrium. So this part above the opening of the two uterine tube is fundus. Below this opening of two, right up to the isthmus, this part is called as the body of the uterus. So from where to where body is extending? It is extending from the opening of the uterine tube right up to the isthmus, below which lies the cervix, okay. So cervix is not the part of the body, okay. So body is between these two, and you can see here in another diagram, this is that uterine tube, okay, which will bring the ovum from that of the ovary. From here ovary, every month one ova will come out, this will go here, and then it will come to the uterine cavity where after fertilization of the ovum, this is the site where the embryo and the fetus will develop within the uterine cavity, and the uterus will enlarge to accommodate the enlarging fetus, okay, to enlarging fetus. Now, so this is the fundus and this is the body. Let us come to the part what is called as cervix. Now, cervix, if you will see, it is having a narrow canal. okay, which is called as cervical canal. Now almost in the middle of the cervix, here it is the attachment of the vagina, which in coronal section is seen as, here the cervix has a two part, the part of the cervix above the attachment of the vagina and a part of the cervix within the below the attachment of the vagina. So that part which lies below the attachment of this vagina, that is called as portio vaginalis, or part of the cervix within the vagina, and part which lies above it, it is the part, okay, which is outside the upper part of the cervix, okay, supravaginal part. It is called a supravaginal part. And if you will try to see the cervical canal, I have drawn a diagram here. Let us see the orientation. This is the vagina attached to this lowermost part of the uterus, that is called as cervix. This is cervical canal, which is a canal which is narrow above and narrow below, and it is broad here in the middle, spindle shape, and then it becomes continuous with the body of the uterus, okay. So only cervical part is shown here, okay, and it is made up of the muscle, smooth muscle, and inner side of this cervical canal is lined by the mucous membrane, and there are the mucosal folds are seen in the posterior wall as well as the anterior wall of the cervical canal, where this mucosal fold are arranged almost obliquely coming towards the center, okay. So these are the mucosal fold. Now this part of the cervix, okay, which is within the vagina, okay, there is an opening in this cervix, and this opening in the cervix is called as the external os, os. This is called as external os, and a narrow opening above, okay, where it meets with the body at the isthmus, and this opening above is also narrow like that of the external os. So it is called as internal os of the cervix. So there are two openings in cervix, okay, at the upper end of the cervical canal, and one which is at the lower end, internal os, and that of the external os. So there are two parts of cervix, supravaginal and vaginal part, So this is the parts of the uterus and cervix. That means the whole uterine parts are these light. Let us go to the next point, and that is the peritoneal relation of the uterus. So I am on this part, the peritoneal relation of the uterus. Let us see the parts. Okay, this uterus, for its most of the part, it is covered by the peritoneum. Okay, let us see the orientation of this diagram. This is the pubic symphysis. Okay, symphysis. Anteriormost part. This is the anterior. Here will be the anterior abdominal wall. Okay, those muscles, the linea alba will be attached, and muscle is there, say for example. So here the peritoneum will line here first to the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall. So I am tracing the reflection of the peritoneum in the lower part of the abdomen. So after the anterior abdominal wall, this peritoneum just above the pubic symphysis will reflect onto the superior surface of the urinary bladder. This structure, posterior to the pubic symphysis, is the urinary bladder. Just in short I have written urinary bladder, and which is made up of the thick muscle coat, smooth muscle. And this is here will be the internal urethral sphincter, and then this is the urethra, okay, female urethra. And this is passing through a structure called as urogenital diaphragm. Urogenital diaphragm. So this is different than the pelvic diaphragm. So this is the urogenital diaphragm, which is pierced by the two openings, two structures, urethra, anteriorly. So this is the urethra, female urethra, so a very short, and this is the opening of the vagina. So this structure here is the vagina. See this is vagina going up to the cervix. So this is that portio vaginalis, or the vaginal or lower part of the cervix, okay, and this is the vagina is here. So this vagina lies posterior to the urinary bladder, okay, and this is the perineal body, a central tendon, perineal body, which is a band of the fibrous tissue, connective tissue, to which many muscles are attached. 8 or 9 muscles are attached of the perineum, okay, including the external anal sphincter is also attached here, okay, a part of the superficial part of the external anal sphincter is also attached to here. So here is the site for this is the sacrum and coccyx, and this is the rectum. So I was telling you about the reflection of this peritoneum after covering to the superior surface of the urinary bladder. This will go and jump from superior surface directly to the anterior surface of the uterus. So whole of the anterior surface above the part of the cervix, okay, supravaginal part of cervix is here. So just above the supravaginal part of the cervix, it will cover the anterior surface of the uterus, then superior surface of the fundus of the uterus, okay. This part was the fundus, okay, and this is covered by the peritoneum. So this will cover to the superior surface of the fundus, and then it will go to the posterior surface of the body of the uterus. From there it will come and will cover to the part of the cervix which is above the vagina, that is supravaginal part of the cervix is also covered by peritoneum. Then this will be covering to the part of the vagina. It's a part of the vagina which is here. It is called as the posterior fornix of vagina, deepest part. This is the posterior fornix of vagina. So it will cover to the vagina to some distance to the posterior surface of vagina, and then it will reflect onto the anterior surface of the rectum. Then it will cover whole of the anterior surface, the upper part of the rectum, then to the side of the rectum, okay, then it will cover. So this in blue color I have drawn, this is the peritoneal cavity, okay, lined by the peritoneum. So whole this blue is peritoneum. Now while it is reflecting here like this, okay, two pouches are produced, okay. One of the smaller pouch which is between the urinary bladder and the uterus here, this pouch, okay, this pouch is called as vesico-uterine pouch, okay. Where should I write? I am writing here. This is that vesico-uterine pouch. Vesico means urinary bladder, and between urinary bladder and uterus it is vesico-uterine pouch, okay. Then there is another pouch which is formed of after reflection over the posterior fornix of the vagina. Here this is quite a deep pouch. It is hardly 2 inches above the perineal body or opening of the anal canal or anal orifice, 2 inches above. This pouch, which is quite deep and dependent part of the peritoneal cavity. So anything if we start collecting, it will first collect into this pouch, and this is called as recto-uterine pouch, okay. Recto because it is between rectum and uterus, hence this pouch is quite deep and it is called as recto-uterine pouch. This is also given the name as the pouch of Douglas. This is called as pouch of Douglas. So this is peritoneal pouch between the rectum and that of the uterus, okay. However, it is reflecting from the upper portion of the vagina, posterior surface of the vagina. So instead of the recto-uterine pouch, it should have been called as the recto-vaginal pouch anyway, but there is nothing like recto-vaginal pouch, okay. So forget about what I am telling you. Now This is how the peritoneal relations are there of the uterus. Okay, and these relations are important because uterus in pregnancy will grow up and it will go very high in the abdomen. Okay, right up to the costal margin it will go. So this peritoneal relation will be different, okay, when it is enlarging. Let us come to a third aspect of this peritoneal reflection on the uterus, and that is called as the broad ligament of the uterus. Let us understand what is the broad ligament of the uterus. Now this the anterior surface and posterior surface was covered by the peritoneum. Fundus was covered. At the same time, this was covering to the uterine tube also. And then from this lateral border of the uterus, the anterior and posterior surface at its lateral border of the body of the uterus, right up to the vagina and the part of the cervix above, supravaginal part of the cervix, anterior layer and posterior layer, they will come and fuse with each other, okay, from the lateral margin. And then they will go on right side as well as on the left side of the body of the uterus. Above it will enclose the uterine tube, and lower down it will get attachment onto the pelvic floor, okay, onto the floor of the pelvis, pelvic diaphragm, I mean to say. And in this double fold, okay, this will be the fold of the peritoneum, which is formed by anterior and posterior layer of the peritoneum, and this is called as the broad ligament of the uterus. BROAD. This is called as broad ligament of the uterus, in which this green color ligament which I have drawn is the ligament of the ovary, okay, and this is the ovary which will lie posterior to the broad ligament, though I have represented here, but it lies posterior to the broad ligament, very close to this end of the uterine tube, through which the ova will go inside the uterine tube. So third aspect of the peritoneal relation of uterus is the broad ligament of the uterus, which is seen as a double fold of peritoneum on either side, right side and left side of the uterus. So on this side as well as on that side is the presence of this broad ligament of relation. Okay, let us come to the fifth point of this question, visceral relation of uterus. What are the viscera which are related to the uterus? Very easy, okay. This diagram will help us to understand what are the visceral relations of the uterus. Now the anterior surface, see this anterior surface of the uterus of the body, it is in relation to the urinary bladder, see this? And this is also in relation to the cervix, not only to the anterior surface of the body, but cervix is also in relation to that of the urinary bladder. So these are the two relations of the uterus anteriorly. So the body and cervix, that means whole of the this uterus is in relation to the anterior surface is in relation to the urinary bladder. Now when the bladder is empty, okay, urinary, then this uterus will come and lie onto the superior surface of the urinary bladder. That means anterior surface will come close to that of the superior surface of urinary bladder. But when urinary bladder is full, okay, then this uterus will be pushed backward, okay, it will become somewhat vertical, okay, which is obliquely placed here onto the superior surface of the urinary bladder will become almost vertical, okay, vertical. So that relation, anterior relation of the uterus keeps on changing, and sometime there may be the coils of intestine may interpose in this vesico-uterine pause. That means a space between these, otherwise not, okay, only sometime, right? Now posterior surface of the uterus here, okay, which is where the peritoneum is not only covering to the body but the part of the supravaginal part of the cervix as well as onto the posterior fornix of the vagina, a little part on the posterior surface of vagina where it is forming the recto-uterine pouch, okay. So this relation of this surface, and this is in relation to the sigmoid colon and the terminal part of the coils of the small intestine, that is ileum. Okay, ileum or ileum as it is called. So sigmoid column and the coils of ileum are relation of the posterior surface of the uterus. Okay, posterior. Now, relation of the cervix. Cervix, the supravaginal part of the cervix, it is, as I said, anteriorly it is related with the urinary bladder, posteriorly it is related with that of the rectum and the recto-uterine pouch, that is pouch of Douglas, in which the coils of the ileum can be there. Okay, but on each side, the relation of the cervix on each side are two important relation which cannot be shown in because it is a mid-sagittal section. So on each side it is in relation to the ureter, which is going to open into the urinary bladder. They are coming from above, from kidney, and going downwards to open into the urinary bladder. They are right and left ureter. Okay, and then an artery is going from below upward. Okay, the ureter is coming from above downward and uterine artery is going from below upward. They will be the lateral relation of the uterus. Let us see a diagram, a small diagram I have drawn, and this will show you the relationship. Okay, this relationship, yes. Here is a diagram. See this diagram? This is the bladder. We are seeing it from above, so bladder. Then these are the two ureter which are coming from the above and posterior wall of the abdominal cavity. They are coming to the pelvic cavity, and left ureter, and this is the right ureter. Now see, understand this. On the posterior superior part of the bladder, okay, this is the vagina section because it is a cross section structure. This is the cross section of vagina, and in the vagina, uppermost part of vagina, this is the cervix. Okay, so which part of the cervix is this? This is the vaginal portion of cervix, portio vaginalis. Okay, so that part is there, and this comes in relation to that of the cervix, comes in relation anteriorly, as I said, bladder, but we are talking about the lateral relation. So on the lateral relation, it is in relation to the ureter, which is coming from above and going towards the bladder, and at the same time, at this level, it is crossed from medial, from lateral to medial. This is the uterine artery which will come from lateral to medial, and then it will ascend on the lateral border of the uterus, okay, on right side as well as left side. This is the uterine artery. So the uterine artery is crossing to the ureter here. This is an important relation of that of the cervix. Okay, this is so these are the visceral relations of the uterus. Okay, visceral relation. Let us come to another aspect of the orientation of this uterus. Okay, and its relation with that of the vagina, and the relation between the body of the uterus and cervix itself. Okay, let us see here. This is the normal position of the uterus when the bladder is empty. Okay, and this is the body of the uterus, this is the cervix of the uterus, and here it is the vagina. That means the relation here in this diagram, they are better seen here. This is the vagina and this is the uterus. Uterus is obliquely placed along with cervix, while vagina is almost vertically placed in normal condition. So this is vagina. If you draw a long axis, okay, axis of the vagina, okay, and a long axis of that of the of that of the cervix, this part is cervix. See this, okay, through the cervical canal, if the long axis of cervix and long axis of vagina, they will cut each other at the 90 degree. So that means the cervical canal or cervix is at right angle to that of the vagina. It is where the two long axes are drawn. They are lying. So it is lying at the 90 degree. and this orientation of the cervix in relation to vagina is called as antversion or antiversion. So this position is called as antiversion, 90 degree. As I said that when the bladder will be full and more full, distended bladder, this will push to the body of this uterus upward. Okay, so this antiversion relation is also going to be change. Okay, also going to change. Otherwise, normally it is antiversion position is there, and as we will learn in the next video that this is an important fact in the stability of the uterus. Otherwise the uterus will start prolapsing or protruding through the vagina, okay, outside. Okay, so this provides an stability, prevents the prevents the prolapse of the uterus through the vagina. Then if you will see this diagram, where it is the diagram showing the anteflexion, this is between the long axis of the body of the uterus and long axis of the cervical canal. And here if the long axis of the body and cervical canal are drawn, this will form a very broad angle. And this broad angle which is formed here is almost average it is 150 or 160 degree, quite wide, okay, angle is produced. And this kind of the angle between the body and cervix, it is called as anteflexion. It is called as anteflexion. So sometime, okay, teacher may ask you about anteversion and anteflexion and its applied importance in prolapse of the uterus, right? So this is another aspect of the orientation of the uterus, okay, of the uterus. Right, let us come to the another point, and this is the arterial supply of the uterus. Okay, uterus is mainly supplied by the uterine artery. Uterus is supplied. Let me draw this artery here for you. Okay, now suppose if I use this diagram to draw you the uterine artery for the uterus. This is a branch from the internal iliac artery, its anterior division, and then it comes close to the vagina, where I had shown you in that cross-sectional diagram where there was the lower part of the cervix surrounded by the vagina, that is the portio vaginalis. This is that artery coming here, okay, and then it will run into the lateral margin of the, close to the lateral margin of the body of the uterus. Then it will turn here to the lower margin of the uterine tube till it will reach to the ovary. Okay, it will reach to the, where it will anastomose with the ovarian artery. That means artery coming and supplying to the ovary, which is also from the internal iliac artery. Okay, so the ovarian artery, which will be here somewhere, here will be the, in this part. Okay, I should have drawn this diagram like this. Here till here will come the uterine artery, and here. Now this uterine artery which anastomose with the ovarian artery here. So some of the branches from ovarian artery may also supply the fallopian tube and that of the uterus. But major supply comes from that of the uterine artery, which will send the branches from the on its anterior surface as well as on its posterior surface between two fold of the peritoneum. That means these branches are running, okay, on the surface, anterior and posterior surface of the uterus, and they may also anastomose in the midline from the right and left uterine artery. Okay, so this is the supply of the uterine artery. Okay, then if we come to see the the venous drainage. Venous drainage is to the same vein, that is the internal iliac vein. Okay, to the first to the uterine vein which runs along with it, and then it will go to the same vein, internal iliac vein. Lymphatics. Okay, if you see the lymphatics of the this uterus, then you will see that these lymphatics are going from the uterus to the various lymph glands, okay, to the various lymph gland. For example, the upper part, that is the fundus, and the upper half of the body, and fundus. Let me draw a diagram here, okay, is possible. Just a minute, let me see the diagram. Okay, I will draw this diagram here. Say for example, this is the uterine cavity, this is the fundus, fallopian tube is here, the pear-shaped body and cervix are here. This is the cervix. Okay, now this part, I was talking of the fundus and the upper part. From here, the lymphatics will go to the lymph nodes situated in front and on the side of the aorta, okay, abdominal aorta. So it drains to the lymph node group which is in front of the aorta and on the side of the aorta, that is para-aortic group of lymph node, aortic and para-aortic. So aortic, upward it will go, and para-aortic group of the lymph node it will run, okay. Then from the lower part, okay, except here, except here the lateral angle, okay, near the fundus, they will go and drain along with a ligament which is called as the broad ligament of the uterus, along with the round ligament, not broad, going inside the broad ligament, but then it is the round ligament of the uterus which is attached to the lateral angles, okay, of this fundus, and then this goes first into the broad ligament, then it goes into the inguinal canal, and then it comes out through the inguinal canal, this round ligament, and then it breaks up into the fibrous strand to attach to the labia majora, subcutaneous tissue of the labia majora here, okay. And this, along with this, the lymphatics, they come along with this broad ligament, and the round ligament, they come and then they drain into the inguinal group of lymph node, just below the inguinal ligament, inguinal group of lymph node, superficial, okay, group. There are two groups. One is deep to the deep fascia, another is superficial. So superficial inguinal group of the lymph node. So the upper end, the fundus drains into the aortic, para-aortic, along with the upper half of the body, but from the lateral angles, okay, of the fundus, it goes to the inguinal group of the lymph node. That you should remember, okay. So sometime the inguinal group will get enlarged, okay, when the pathology is within the uterus, upper part of the uterus, okay. Now from the lower part of the uterus, okay, of the body, lower part of the body, lymph goes to the external iliac group of lymph node, okay, external iliac group, okay, as well as then it will go to the internal, so it will goes to the external iliac group. Now from cervix, this lymphatic drainage, okay, from cervix is into the different direction, to the lateral side, to that of the posterior side which is close to the sacrum, and to the anterior side. But then this group of lymph node, they will go to the internal and external iliac of group of internal and external iliac group of the, which are along the veins, okay, external and iliac veins, lymph nodes attach. But from posterior aspect of the cervix, this may go to the sacral lymph node, which are present on the anterior aspect of the sacrum. So from posterior aspect, the cervix drains into the sacral group of the lymph node. Last point of this question is the applied anatomy. Let us come to the what are the applied importance. If you see the applied importance of this, there is the prolapse of the uterus is a common disease in females, okay, at the later half of their life, okay, adult females, okay. Why the uterus starts prolapsing through the vagina? And the most of the reasons about this I will tell you in the next video, where I will tell you the supports of the uterus, okay, supports of the uterus, ligaments which are, I have intentionally not told you about the ligaments of the uterus, okay, because this will be covered into a separate video. Next video will be on support of uterus, where all ligaments of the uterus will be covered. Okay, so because of the weakness of these ligaments, this uterus starts prolapsing inside the vaginal cavity. Though the antiflexion, antiversion, okay, and various structures, they support the uterus to keep it in normal position, but sometimes it starts protruding, okay, or prolapsing through the vagina and comes out, at the vulva. Okay, so this is an important applied anatomy, that is the prolapse of the uterus. Second important is the carcinoma of the cervix, which is the most common after the breast. Okay, carcinoma of the breast. This is the most common cancer in the ladies. Okay, in the ladies. And this carcinoma of cervix, it arises from the stratified squamous epithelium. What is stratified squamous epithelium? That is this. Where is this? Yes, you just understand here. This part, that is the from external os and right up to the vagina and the undersurface of vagina. It is lined by an epithelium which is the stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. And this part of the cervix, which is the portio vaginalis part surrounding to that of the external os, this is the common site for origin of the cancer. This epithelium become cancerous, okay? Epithelium become cancerous mostly, okay? And then this is called as the cervical cancer, which is said to be mostly because of the viral infection, okay? Because of the viral infection. And this is the carcinoma of cervix, okay? It is this carcinoma of cervix is dangerous, okay? This has to be diagnosed early, otherwise this will have a severe consequences, because many important structures are surrounding to this cervix part of the uterus, and the cancer may go to the neighboring organs, okay? It may go to the neighboring organs very rapidly. Third important applied anatomy is fibromyoma, or just simply myoma, okay? And this is a non-cancerous tumor. Tumors means a swelling, okay? A lump inside the myometrium. So the myometrium part, that is the muscle intermediate layer. This is myometrium, and within this myometrium there may be a tumor or a large swelling may arise here, which is either due to the muscle or it may be due to the connective tissue which are present between the smooth muscle fiber. So, or with both, that is fibrous and muscular. So, it is called as fibromyoma, and it is non-cancerous. It will not spread, okay, to the distant places as the cancer cells they spread, and cancer is spread to the other organs, okay. But then this may cause a lot of problem in a lady which is regularly menstruating, okay, middle-aged lady. Then this fibromyoma will interfere with the pregnancy. This will not allow the pregnancy to continue, okay. And then the bleeding takes place, okay. That means the menstrual cycle will not remain regularly. It will be a disturbed menstrual cycle because of the presence. More bleeding will take place during the menses. So, though it is a non-cancerous tumor, but it is has to be removed surgically, okay. So, that is a third condition or third applied importance in relation to that of the uterus, okay. So, this complete a question on to the uterus, okay. Thank you very much for watching this video.